Um, a few weeks ago, I shared at our home church. I preached for our pastor, who's very sick, and our office is down in the basement of the church, our ministry office. Anyway, so as I was preaching, I was sharing about the time. And I said to everybody, I don't have a watch, so I didn't know what time was. And then I said, you know what, but I need a new watch. And so I didn't give any thought to it. I just put it out there. And I came to my office a couple of days later, and guess what? I had a new watch. And so I have a watch here today, and I'll keep my eye on the time. But I thought, well, now, if I ask for a watch, maybe I can ask for other things, and they will show up on my desk. So just to let you know, I need $1 million. So anyway, if you want to drive to my office, is in St. Catharines. I just thought I'd share that funny story that happened to me. And anyway, I found out who bought it for me, and I have yet to thank him. I'm preaching in my home church again next Sunday, so I'll be able to share that. Maybe you will give me something else. I don't know. I like a, Porsche or something like that as well. Always good to be with you, and thank you so much for continuing to pray for my wife and I and the ministry of Agora Network Ministries. As you know, our ministry is to help resource and support the local church and the pastors with the mental health needs within the walls. So we are developing supports and resources. And just to let you know, this fall we have a number of new online supports that will be available. And they're going to be dealing with topics like suicide and resilience and burnout and self-care and others. So if you're interested in learning more and learning skills about your own self-care or your own mental health, I encourage you to go on our website. We're trying to fill it up with great resources and support so that you can get in on and help yourself and to help others. So it's under the Agora Academy. So if you're looking for online course this fall, please look there. Also, I want to highlight, because in 2 weeks' time, we have our second major virtual interactive international number of words there, but our conference, the Perseverance Conference. Again, it's a time for you to come on for 3 hours. We have speakers from Canada and the United States. If you know the name Elizabeth Manley, she was the Olympic medalist, silver medalist in 1988 in Calgary. She was called the Canadian Sweetheart, and she's going to be one of our 3 speakers. She's going to be sharing a little about her journey after her during her career and how to help us build the resilience in our lives. And then we have ex-NHL goalie Corey Hirsch. He played for teams like Vancouver Canucks, New York Rangers, and I think there was one more. But during his career, he was suffering severely with anxiety and depression, but hid it from his teammates and from the owners and management of the NHL teams. And he went into a really deep dive in his mental health journey. So he's going to be talking about mental health and how to help our kids that are struggling with their own mental health challenges. And then we have a Christian doctor, Caroline Leaf. She is a neurologist. I can't say that we're pathologists. And she's going to be dealing with the brain. How many have a brain here today? We all have a brain, right? But she's going to talk about the difference between the soul, our inner world, and our brain, and how our brains respond well or not so well to the soul of our lives, our healing, our trauma, our abuses, our hurts. And so I encourage you to go on a website or go to the perseveranceconference.ca and check out the conference. The price point is right for our conference, and we would love to have you join us for that conference on September 10th from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So just a little bit of your Saturday. I know you will be blessed and educated and help yourself. And so we encourage you to go online there. Colossians chapter 1, that's why I'm here, to share with you a particular passage of Colossians chapter 1. I know already there's been a few messages, and so I want to pick up on verse 15 for you to verse 20. But before I share this verse, I want just to say this, that we have a 3.5-year-old granddaughter. Her name, I think I told you before, her name is Violet May Grace. And Violet May Grace is one of the most incredible young ladies that I know. And I say that not because I'm biased and not because she's my granddaughter, but she's one of the smartest little girls that I have met in a long, long time. But there's something about my granddaughter that is really something to witness. And like a lot of 2 years old and 3 years old and 4 years old, they think that the world revolves around them, don't they? They think that there's the center of life. And so everything that she does is because of her age and her maturity level. It's all about her, right? And so when she wants something, she wants it. If not, she makes a stink about it. And she knows how to now manipulate our feelings, right? And she knows how to put on this face, when you say no, but Papa, your heart melts and you do what you said you wouldn't do. But she feels like she's the center of the universe. Now, what's sad about that, not about her, but many of us feel that we're the center of the universe too. That everything has to be about me. And in a way, as believers, we try to put up this superior, superior manifestation that we're greater than anybody else is, which is wrong. And you know it's wrong, and I know it's wrong. You're not preeminent as believers. You're not supreme. Your supremacy is not anywhere near the supremacy of Jesus Christ. For He's the only one that's supreme. He's the only one that we can call supreme master and ruler of the universe. When we come to this portion, Paul, and you know this probably because of the other preachers that stood here before me, you know that Paul is writing this letter to a group of Christians in a city called Colossae. And it's between AD 60 and 61, way before I was born, and you. And anyway, he's writing this letter in jail. Now, if I was in jail, I wouldn't be really concerned about other people around me or that people are in my life. I would be concerned for me, my survival, my well-being, right? But not Paul. Paul is in prison, and he's so passionate about the church of Jesus that he wants to help and encourage other parts of the area that Rome conquered, that Paul had his missionary journeys on. He was so concerned for them. When he heard that they were struggling in different ways, he would write letters to them. Now, Epaphras is a friend of Paul, and he was in the city of Rome where Paul was there in prison. And by Epaphras speaking to Paul, Paul knew that the Christians in Colossae were struggling with the Christology of Christ, of God. They were struggling with the deity of Jesus Christ because there were false teachers that were trying to say that Jesus was not supreme, that Jesus was not God, that Jesus was not who he said he was. So Paul gets down with his feather pen and ink and papyrus, and he starts to write this letter to these Christians. So if Epaphras would take it back to Colossians. And by the way, when he was in prison in Rome, he wrote letters to the Ephesians as well. So he's writing. And on his mind is, how can I share with these believers that Jesus is who he said he is? So Paul is in prison in Rome. Now get this. This book of Colossians is so subversive, meaning this, that as Paul looks around him and he understands the Roman Empire, he takes what the Roman Empire is about and he puts it in his letter through illustrations and imagery. So we're going to read words like image, firstborn, reconcile, peace in this passage. And when we do, and the word head of, and when we do, Paul is thinking about the Roman Empire, which they think that they're supreme. They think that they're the greatest. They think that no one else is like them, that they are the center of everybody's world. Now let's read the passage. Colossians chapter 1, verse 15. Now we have to know that prior to, God is saying that he has rescued people through his son, Jesus Christ. So now we pick it up in verse 15. He says, now the Son, he is the image of the invisible God. Note the word image. He says, the firstborn over all creation. Note the word firstborn. For by him all things were created. Note the word created. Things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things were created by him and for him. He is before all things. Note that phrase, he is before all things. And in him all things hold together. Note that phrase is important. And he is the head of the body. Note that phrase. And the firstborn from the dead. Note that phrase. So then in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all of his fullness dwell in him. Note the word fullness. And through him to reconcile to himself. Note the word reconcile. All things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Note the word peace. As Paul is thinking about the deity of Jesus and thinking about the Roman Empire and how much confusion and hurt and pain and turmoil is in the world because of this empire, he wants to make sure that, number one, they know that Jesus Christ is supreme. But number two, he also wants to know that there is peace. There can be peace in the midst of your storm because of what Jesus Christ has done. You follow? So when we come to verse 15, it says he is the image. The image. I want you to go with me to Hebrews chapter 1, please. Hebrews chapter 1, just a couple of books over. I love this passage because it really helps us understand, again, Jesus and who he is. By the way, who do you think Jesus is? That's an important question because many people in our world today are confused about a lot of things. And they're confused about religion, Christianity, spirituality. They're confused about who is God, what is God. They're confused about Jesus. Friends, listen to me. As a believer in Jesus Christ, you can't be confused about who Jesus is. And so again, when we go back to Colossians in just a moment, Paul says, I want to understand that Jesus is God. But you have to understand that you need to know who he is so you can share and tell people when they ask the question, who is Jesus? You remember Jesus said to Peter, who do people think I am? Finally, Peter said, you are the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God. So, Hebrews chapter 1, it says this. In the past, God spoke to our forefathers through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom he made the universe. Now, get this. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. Paul says in Colossians, he is the image. The image. The word has this reference to a stamp that you put ink on, and you stamp the paper with the ink. On the paper, because the ink is on the stamp, what is on the paper is the exact representation of the stamp. Now, in Rome, the image of the Roman Empire was great. They had gods, they had statues, they had image, they had gold, they had eagles, they had so many things. Image was so important to them. But their exact representation wasn't about God. It was about their power. It was about who they were, about their rulership. And they intimidated people with their image. Can you think of other nations in the past who did that as well? Sure we had. Other nations after the Roman nation empire, we see other nations maybe 100 years ago rising up with this image to intimidate and show power. But Jesus here, Paul says, but Jesus is the image. He is the exact representation of the invisible God. We know this about God. God is what? Spirit. God is spirit. And Jesus Christ has, as a man, we read in John chapter 1, and we'll go there in a few minutes, he was the Word, he was the Logos. He took on flesh. Jesus did. But as he took on flesh and ministered to people, he was the exact representation of the Father. For Jesus said many times when he walked on this earth, and we find it in the book of John, he said, if you know me, you know the Father. If you see me, you have seen the Father. What Jesus is saying is, I am the exact representation of God that you worship. To know the Father is to know me. To know me is to know the Father. So my friends here today, if you want to get to know God, get to know the person of Jesus Christ. Get to know his image, not in a bad way, but the image that reflects and manifests the very character of God. Does that make sense to you today as a believer? It should. So what do we know about Jesus? Well, he is the image, the exact representation of God the Father. Jesus has said that I have come not to do my own will, but to do the will of what? My Father in heaven. He said, my food is to do the what? The will of my Father. So should ours. Now, we're not God. And we know that. We're not Jesus. But listen to me. In our living, in our going, we should reflect the very character. We should be an image of who Jesus is. Think about your neighborhood. Think about your workplace. Think about your family. Are you representing? Are you a reflection of the one who's superior and preeminent? But Paul goes on. He said, yeah, so he's the image of the indivisible God. Number 2, he says, and the firstborn over all creation. Over all creation. Go back to, or go to John, please. John chapter 1, please. Now we can go all the way back to Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And we can list all the things that God created. But I want you to really understand here now, John is talking about the Word of God, the Word, the Logos, Jesus, who came, who put on flesh, who tabernacled among us as believers. He was fully God and fully man. But look at verse 1. It says this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, who? The Word. Go down to verse 14. The Word is Jesus. He came flesh. Through him, all things were, what's the word? Look at it. All things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. We see here in John chapter 1 that the Word, the Logos, this God-man, Jesus, he's the what? The creator of all things. But let's go back to Colossians, because it says this, that he's the firstborn over all creation. Now, some people get stuck on the word firstborn. They say, see, Jesus was created. You see, he was created. No, Jesus has been always. Never a beginning, never an end. He's God. But the word firstborn that I got you to note means this. Now, some people, you look at the word and think of birth order, right? My firstborn is now 38 years old. I can't believe that. And she has, 4 other siblings. But there's something else about my firstborn that helps us to understand this word. It's not talking about birth order. It's talking about rank and position. So in the Roman Empire, rank and position was very important. My daughter, 38, firstborn, but because of her rank and position as the oldest, sometimes she thinks that she can tell the other four what to do. Have you had children? You know the how that goes, right? And so sometimes the other kids kind of walk away from her because they don't like the fact that she's usurping her position and rank as firstborn. That's the idea here. So when it says he was the firstborn of all creation, meaning this, that Jesus Christ is showing his supremacy in creation as one who is positioned higher than anyone else. And he has created all things. Things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authority, all things were created by him and for him. See how Paul is putting all of this in? It's amazing, the subversion of this book. Paul says, Jesus is supreme, for he is God. You want to know the Father? Get to know me. He says, I am the firstborn. I am positioned in my rank as the highest, as the creator of all things. Man, Jesus is something else, isn't he? Not just a man, but the creator of you and me and everything around us. That's who Jesus is. Everything that we see in our world, Jesus has created. The fall is my second most favorite time of year. Early fall. I hate late fall because I know what's coming. I know what their backaches, shoveling snow, and slipping and sliding on car wrecks and salt and yuck. But I like the first part of fall. Do you know why? Because I think in the fall, we get a nice glimpse of the glory and creator God. What an artist he is. That's who Jesus is. He's not just this blah deity in the sky. He likes to take his paintbrush once in a while and say, you want to see something great? Look at the stars. There's this, I think a new telescope in our skies now. Have you seen some of the pictures? Amazing pictures of this telescope that has gone beyond anything we can ever imagine. The colors, the styles, the formats of the stars and galaxies. It's amazing. And sometimes God takes his paintbrush and he paints the trees in the color of the leaves. In our busy world, don't miss the artistry of Jesus. And stand in awe. You know what? There's a lot of ugly in our world. Turn it around and look at the beauty. Because our world is teaching us today to look at the downside of life. Isn't it? Stop looking down and look up and see the glory of God and his creation. He has created everything. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Go back to Hebrews. Hebrews. You know the joke there, right? Men should always make coffee in the morning because he brews. That was sick. I know. You have heard that before. Uh, look at again in chapter 1 and verse 3 again. So it says this. The sun is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things. And look at these next 4 words. Say them with me. I'm reading the NIV. Say the next 4 words if I can find them again. By his powerful word. Go back to Colossians. It says this in verse 17. He's before all things, and in him all things hold together. Who is holding everything together? Jesus. Have you ever wondered why the moon hasn't crashed into the earth? Ever wonder why all the planets in our solar system work like clockwork? Ever wonder why when we look up in the sky, we see the North Star and the different, I forget whether the Big Dipper and Little Dipper and all of those dippers up there? Ever wonder why they stay together? Because Jesus, through the word of his power, keeps them that way. Isn't that neat? Everything that is held together by God. I know these are truths that we know, but these are truths that have to burn our hearts, that we can't let go. We say, yeah, we have heard that from Sunday school. Yeah, you have. But unfortunately, as believers, we forget about these things. The power of Jesus is supreme over everybody's power. And he holds the stars and the moon and the earth and the solar system and the universes. He holds them together by speaking his word. And say, stay still. Our God, our Jesus is superior. Let's get one more in, can we? If you're asleep, wake up. I wasn't referring to you. The young man down here, he's saying, preacher, get done, right? Yeah, he's honest. Get done. He's going. And maybe you want to say that too, but you're too adult to say that. Anyway, I love kids. They tell you the truth. But I'm only going to be, young man, listen to me. I'm only going to be another hour, okay? Are you okay with that? I tell you what, Tim Hortons is down the road. I want a small decaf black. Okay, can you bring it back to me? No? Okay. Anyway, so one more. Here we go. 5 more minutes, okay? Here we go. Look at the next one. It says, and he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead. He is the head of the body. Now, earlier I said, you all have brains, right? Yeah. You all have heads. And what's inside the head? The brain. As a mental health ministry, I got to bring this in. The thing that we know about our mental health is that our brains think. Our brains help us to feel emotions. Our brains make decisions, responses, and reactions. And when we hear this phrase that he is the head of the body, now we know if the head is gone, the body is dead. And the head is so important to the whole body. When it's gone, there's no life. Inside the head is the brain, where it thinks, feels, and reacts. And I think that Paul uses this word to help us realize this, that as the head of the church, he is the one that thinks, feels, and helps us respond and react in the way that we should. When we pray, we should pray for the mind of Jesus, the mind of Christ. When we live out our lives, we should pray that the emotions that we feel are right emotions. When I see that man, like I did this morning on the street, and all of his possessions were in a little grocery cart, and I thought, this man, this is his world. This is all he knows. And my heart was moved for him. I couldn't do anything for him, but my heart was moved towards him. Look, folks, to know the mind of Christ is good, but we have to feel the feelings of Christ. When he looked over Jerusalem before he was crucified, it said he cried over the city, didn't he? When the little children came and sat around him, he said to the disciples, "Suffer not the children, let them come. They bring happiness." Feel. I said this to the men's retreat, and some of you were there. When we encounter Jesus, like the men encountered Jesus on the road to Emmaus, they said this when Jesus left them. They said, "Did not our hearts burn within us?" And then when we walked with him on the road, when Jesus was expounding the scriptures from the prophets about Jesus, does your heart burn like Jesus' heart for the world? Or have we just decided to look away and maybe become very despondent and disinterested and apathetic and say, well, nothing I can do, and feel nothing for the lost? He's the head of the church. He thinks for the church. And we need to go to him and ask him what his plan is for my life and for the church. What do you want us to do? What is our specific role in this kingdom that we're in? But it says also, he's not only the head of the church, the body, and we need to understand how he thinks and how he feels and how he behaves, so we do the same. It says, the last one, he's the firstborn of the dead. His resurrection power. Again, it's not talking about firstborn is in order, but position and rank. If you go back to Genesis or Exodus, and you read there about how the plagues, and the last plague was that the firstborn would die, that didn't have the blood over the doorpost. And we see that the Pharaoh's firstborn, what happened to him? He died. This firstborn was supposed to take over for his dad. This firstborn was supposed to be the Pharaoh. This firstborn was supposed to be the supremacist, the one that was going to be sovereign ruler. Now he's dead. The imagery here is going back to Egypt. The firstborn here of the dead means that Jesus Christ, because of his death, burial, and resurrection, because he lives again, he is now, based on the Egyptian firstborn meaning, he's now the supreme ruler, Pharaoh, if you want to. Because it says, and look at it says here, firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the what? The supremacy. Hey folks, Jesus Christ is the greatest. He is the best. He is the most excellent. He's preeminent. He's ruler above every ruler. He's king above all kings. He's Lord above all lords, Jesus Christ. And when you read this passage, know that Paul is putting together the image of Rome. It's not going to stand. It's going to fall. But Jesus Christ's kingdom will last forever because why? He's supreme. And here's the kicker. You and I, as believers in Jesus, will rule with him forever. What a great beginning, ending of this wonderful kingdom. Well, there's no end, but you know what I mean, of the story. So is Jesus supreme? Is Jesus supreme? Is Jesus supreme? Do you live it? Do you love it? Do you like it? Will you now be able to share more with the people that you know when they said, who is Jesus? Well, let me tell you. And go to Colossians and unpack for them who this Jesus really is. Thank you, Bob.